Now, someone who's really good for something is today's featured guest, Michelle Lott, who has a hard stop because she has important multi-corporate international business deals happening at the top of the hour. So we're blessed to have her. Ladies and gentlemen, put your virtual hands together. My friend and yours, Michelle Lott.
Thank you. So this is an action-packed presentation about medical device.
77 slides.
Yep. So that's what I was getting to.
Okay, everyone be quiet.
Well, no, you don't have to, because we probably will move through some of this really quickly. And I know I was anticipating that this group, it would be very interactive and we might not get to it. So I will kind of fly through some things and then stop, and then we can have a discussion about the different sections. So I'm not expecting to cover the whole thing.
We'll put this presentation in our weekly meetings so you can download it, because clearly we won't do it justice with the 52 minutes remaining. Hit it.
All right.
And if I'm not here at the end, it's because I'm sleeping.
Okay.
No reflection on you, of course.
Okay.
Okay.
So, we're going to start with some basics here and kind of just build on the definitions to understand the kind of concept of claims and how they're regulated. So, the definition of a label is it's just kind of generally that written, printed, or graphic matter upon the immediate container. So this is kind of like the kind of outer identification with real basic information. So if you think of it in kind of a context of a universe or a galaxy, so right now we're on the planet label, and this is like the most basic level that things can be regulated in terms of claims. But if we expand that definition and we look at labeling, was somebody saying something? Okay. If we look at that, expand that definition, look at the concept of labeling, this expands it to not just that outer label, but any written, printed, or graphic material of any article on its containers, wrappers, or material accompanying it. This also includes like marketing material like posters, pamphlets, booklets, and this concept is also referred to as promotional labeling. And this includes everything on a company's website. And then if we look at how the QMSR definitions, which is coming in February of 2026, talks about the concept of labeling and marketing. They are superseding the definition of labeling in ISO 1345 with the definition in the FD&C Act. And so they are maintaining that for the purposes of compliance with the QMSR. They have also decided that a separate definition for marketing is not necessary because marketing is not addressed in ISO 1345, and that they think that the extensive use of the term advertising throughout the FD&C Act, kind of implies all of those things involved with marketing. So now what has happened to our kind of universe of label and labeling? So now we see that the label is really just a subset of this larger thing that is the concept of labeling as a whole. So the problem is that while the FD&C Act uses the term advertising, they don't really, and marketing literature and marketing communications, they don't specifically define these. They're somewhat vague in terms of what does this mean for medical devices. So if we look at kind of kinds of some more legal definitions, or advertising is the act or practice of attracting public notice and attention. It is also can aid directly or indirectly in the furtherance of an idea. And then it also causes direct attention to a business, a commodity, or a service. So now we see that our labeling, the concept of labeling is really like Jupiter, and Pluto has been, which is the label, has been kind of downgraded here in the whole universe and scheme of things. And then advertising and label is a subset of that labeling universe. So then if we take all of that understanding about what is advertising, marketing, labeling, and then we look at the concept of how does that impact the concept of misbranding. So misbranding is defined if a device label or labeling is false or misleading. It's not only untrue, it can be forged, fraudulent, or deceptive. And this means that the labeling is deceptive if it creates a false impression in the mind of the reader. If it creates a false impression, that could result from either a false or deceptive statement, or it could be an omission by failure to inform the consumer. And in that case, the label would remain silent to certain consequences or be otherwise deceptive. Also, the labeling does not bear adequate directions for use, like warnings against the use for certain pathological conditions or by certain patient populations where it could be dangerous to health. Or if it is OTC, it could fail to meet the additional OTC device labeling requirements. So in that case, a device can be also considered misbranding by unsubstantiated claims, because claims must be substantiated with data when making a statement to another device, like even just saying something's like twice as fast or better than, or some other comparative to maybe another device or another procedure. And in that case, it could also lead to reclassification if the labeling is making new or previously unsubstantiated claims, or it promotes the use of the device for purposes or conditions other than those that are currently marketed. So then if we take that one step further and we look at the concept of what does it mean to be adulterated? Well, the medical devices in the FTC and Act in Section 501 says that a device is adulterated if it either it fails to meet performance standards, if it fails to conform with the requirements for an approved pre-market approval application, or a product development protocol, if it's a banned device, or if it's a violation of good manufacturing practice requirements, or if it fails to comply with a IDE. And in that case, the FDA considers these to be not only misleading, but adulterated, and then you can no longer commercially distribute as is. Okay. Any comments before we move into the difference between FTC and FDA and how all these definitions affect who regulates what? Okay. So in terms of the FTC versus the FDA says that it has the primary responsibility for claims in all forms of advertising, and their main job is to ensure that claims about the benefit and safety of health-related products are truthful, not misleading, and supported by science. Whereas the FDA, their primary responsibility is for claims that appear in labeling, which, think back to that concept that we talked about with the labeling, advertising, and label, including the package, product inserts, and other promotional materials available at the point of sale. So what's important between the two is that they have a memorandum of understanding between the FTC and the FDA, and that these two agencies work closely to ensure that their enforcement efforts are consistent to the fullest extent feasible through the FDA and FTC liaison agreement, which means that they could work that either one or the other could take the lead, or they could work in unison to figure out how many of the labeling rules and requirements between the two have you violated? So if we look at who has jurisdiction for promotional labeling and advertising. So promotional labeling and advertising, again, is regulated by the FTC and the FDA. In terms of the FTC, they regulate non-restricted medical devices, whereas the FDA represents or regulates restricted medical devices. And restricted medical devices are those that have the potential for harmful effect, or they require collateral measures for use. In this case, the CDRH within the FDA is the primary organization, and specifically the Office of Compliance, or OTC, takes the lead in this jurisdiction. Whereas on the FTC side, they look at the legal standards in the regulation of all advertising, specifically in the areas of substantiation, deception, and fairness. And so they prohibit advertising that makes deceptive claims, fails to reveal relevant information, or makes unfair or unobjective claims where there's no reasonable basis. So the Federal Trade Commission, their goal is to prevent unfair or deceptive acts or practices by providing, make sure that marketers are providing information about the benefits and safety of health-related products, and that they are also, so anyone that is participating in deceptive and marketing is potentially liable under FTC law. Now, what is interesting is that the FTC has a helpful guide called the Health Products Compliance Guide. I've got a link here for you. They kind of give some outlines and guidance and boundaries around what they consider truthful in advertising. So both FTC and FDA and the FD&C Act might apply. So, like, for an example, in the FTC, they have guidances around specifically like mobile health app developers for best practices. And they have another guidance document about marketing your mobile health app and how to get it right. Whereas on the FDA Act, you've got, dozens of guidance documents on medical devices for software functions, mobile medical applications, general wellness, clinical decision support software. There's all kinds of guidances depending on what the health app does on the FDA that might also be relevant in regulating the product. Okay. Any questions about the FDA, FTC before we move into the examples? So in terms of FTC enforcement, these are generally more informal actions. They typically will include like a letter that has examples of language that they consider problematic in your advertising. And then they're going to require the recipient to correct the problem immediately and contact the FTC quickly to confirm that they made the changes. But if you didn't make the changes, or they feel they believe that you've caused some kind of harm or some kind of deception that has been impactful to the public, they can take legal action and issue cease and desist letters, and also injunctions and restitution that includes civil penalties. So here is one example of a warning letter from the FTC to a company called In Movement. And this is a treadmill company where they say in their warranty that only components supplied by and installed by In Movement and the service providers are going to keep the warranty valid. And that the FTC, that this unlawfully hinders the consumer's right to repair their products. And they further say that under the FTC Act, companies cannot offer warranties where they condition certain things, like you can't, and they say that it's deceptive for companies to create a misleading impression that the consumer will void their warranty by using unauthorized points. So This is an example where they took action and they sent them a letter. They had to correct it within 30 days. And then the FTC had to review the changes. But I think in this case, they ultimately ended up with getting fined by the FTC for the people who they didn't honor the warranty. So the FDA enforcement actions and warning letter examples. So in terms of FDA enforcement, FDA can take actions through a notice of violation, which are usually for practices that do not jeopardize public health. And these only require that the company stop using materials contained in the claim. And they may or may not issue a warning letter without a prior notice of violation. If they issue a warning letter, this is going to contain much stronger language, and it is generally addressed to the company's CEO. They can also take judicial action, which includes consent decrees, injunctions, and seizures. And then FDA is taking enforcement actions against companies that deems are breaking the rules of the use of social media. Which I've got a list of guidance documents around social media in the references. So you could get a warning letter if you're making promotional claims that are outside the clearance of your 510K, if you're exceeding the product's classification exemptions, if you're promoting products within unsubstantiated claims, and if your previous warnings have not been addressed adequately. So let's look at this warning letter from A1 Engineering. A1 Engineering made a product called the Neurotis SX series machines and Pico toners. The problem is that this specific regulation for this product is for a therapeutic massager to relieve minor muscle aches and pains. That is the specific intended use described in that particular regulation. The warning letter said that these were misbranded because they were being advertised for intended uses that are different from those that are legally marketed for the therapeutic massager. And that further that these were, the FDA considered these adulterated because the labels and marketing materials from the firm do not have an approved PMA or IDE for the devices as described and marketed. So if we look at some of the things that they were claiming about these two products, they had just a laundry list of things that they said that they could do that include, things, kind of wild and hard to substantiate, like ATP production, increased collagen and elastin, even improved circulation. And the list just goes on. They have claims about enhancing biological processes, stimulating hydrolysis of triglycerides. It's just getting kind of excessive and silly. And then also it just keeps going through about every form of advertising that they have. And on and on. And so in the warning letter results in consequences that they need to immediately cease activities, including the commercial distribution of these devices until such corrective actions are taken and agreed to by the FDA. So, but here we go with round two. So don't make the same mistake twice. So that first warning letter was issued in November of 2015. But just about a year ago, we have yet the other warning letter in October of 2023, where they're up to their same old antics and where the FDA has considered these that after review of their website on marketing materials adulterated because they're making the same claims. Is that the body system is intended for muscle conditioning to stimulate healthy muscles per the regulation, but they're making claims that say it's going to stimulate nerves and muscles, causing muscle contraction for aesthetic beautification. So they're trying to get back into that cosmetic space. So the FDA goes on in that warning letter and says that because of the specific anatomical locations that they have called out, that there is a new significant risk, but related to those anatomical locations. And because they said that the chest portions of the face and neck have a different should have warnings against, or the original cleared system has warnings against the use on those areas in the IFUs. And then they turn around and start marketing these products for conditions that are essentially contraindicated or locations. And so they're promoting the use of the systems on prohibited areas. So once again, they have to withdraw their product from the market and take extensive corrective actions to on their marketing materials, their product, etc. So they have to immediately cease their activities again, including commercial distribution. So the big learning lessons from this one is that new anatomical areas, which are different, constitute a new intended use. And further, that these are also an indication outside of the claims that they were making were indications outside of the specified intended use in the regulations. And then further, don't make the same mistake twice. I don't know, but how they must have not thought that the expense that they had to correct these things with the FDA outweighed the money that they made selling them for contraindications to do it twice. Okay. Any questions on that one?
No, but I do have a statement that my wife is a functional medicine nutritional coach, and the conferences that she goes to, the claims these people make and the amount of cash sales that they do at these shows are exactly the reason why they keep making these claims.
Yep, exactly.
Michelle, you hit on social media, and it's interesting. I do have a social media procedure with MBQC that I offer all my clients, and nobody wants to use it. I mean, they're just like, oh, don't worry about it. We're going silent. And then they do a press release, and did regulatory look at it? No, they're not sensitive enough. It's like they really think this is a joke, that nobody's ever gonna ding them on it. And so it's interesting. Have you done any, and it's one of my things for this year I want to do, any analysis on social media and 483s or warning letters?
Not specifically social media, but a lot of these examples, because I didn't go into the detail, but that was not just website, but it was some of those examples included other social media. But that's a good question. I wonder how, I wonder if that might be a good question for the basal guys for their post-market module. I wonder if they monitor warning letters.
That would be very interesting, because it's kind of interesting. I'm fascinated that people don't consider it, and then you get your marketing people, and they can't help themselves. They want to make a claim, and they go, well, it's not really a claim. I'm trying to advertise. I'm like, no, that is a claim. You're making a claim. And so it would be a good, interesting research to kind of do a little dive into it. I'm trying to get my head out from underwater and do that research, because I think we would find that there's probably more nonconformances out there that people aren't just talking about it as much.
Oh, I totally agree. So if we look at this next example, Celluderm, this is the same product, that therapeutic massager, and they are making similar exaggerated claims about stimulating the lymphatic system, reducing congestion, and breaking up fat, which I want that. Breaking up fat.
It works.
I don't believe they do that. So FDA sent them a letter that also said that their intended use is not consistent with the devices classified under this regulation, and therefore they're exceeding the class 1 exemption, and they are no longer class 1 exempt because of their intended use. And what's interesting about this is that both of these warning letters are happening around the same time that FDA has got, you know, a very clear enforcement effort around the therapeutic massager industry, because they're masquerading as, you know, unapproved devices. So, you know, so there are times that, you know, you shouldn't, FDA will have a initiative around these kind of devices that are making, you know, exaggerated claims, especially in the areas of, you know, cosmetic usage. And I also have seen this with other types of products, like the oil and bite mouthpieces for snoring. FDA kind of was on a witch hunt for those firms. I had a client that was getting audited by FDA every year for 5 years, even though they had no 483s. And it turned out FDA was going to all of these companies because they were about to change the policy. So they were trying to do some more research into how these products were being marketed. So, Andre?
Yeah, Michelle, on this one here where it says no longer exempt, on this example, could they have agreed to just withdraw those other claims and remain as a 510K exempt massager?
They could, if they just had changed their claims, and likely probably sent a notice to the people who had bought it underneath the other claims,
Okay,
that it should be only used as a therapeutic massager.
okay.
Michelle,
Yes.
and what about secondary claims? Like you only claim that you stimulate muscles, that muscles contract, and then you refer to that muscle contraction is generally as a positive influence on whatever. And you substantiate the claim of the muscle contraction with some, I don't know, some scientific reports or whatever. Are you then claiming the same thing as that the muscle contraction claims?
You know, look, that's a good question. And I think that kind of in this area where a lot of these products are kind of in a class 1 space, I think that secondary claim is more significant that where you're 510K exempt than maybe some that are 510K. But in general, I will tell you, for products that are reviewed for 510K, FDA does not like that. What you're calling a secondary claim, I'm calling is like the transitive property of regulatory, where it's like A equals B and B equals C. So therefore A equals C. FDA does not make that connection between A and C without showing your work. And a lot of times they will not just buy literature for it.
Okay.
Yep. That's a conversation I've had in pre-subs and 510Ks. But for sure, for class 1s, I would think that they would go after them for saying, hey, you know what, this is taken a step too far, and this is like beyond what we intended in this exemption. Okay. Any other thoughts?
I have a couple of questions. So I guess, first of all, how does the FDA find out about this? Do they sort of regularly check a bunch of medical device companies, or is it more like consumers that are, you know, seeing the information and then reporting it to the FDA? How do they usually find out?
It could be both, you know, specifically for some of these devices where people are using them like on their face and they're contraindicated for their face. You know, maybe they get burned or have some other problem. They might file like a MedWatch report on their own. So that could be one area. But then both FTC and FDA do have people that are out looking on the internet and social media for these for these types of claims.
Right. Okay.
Or like I said, with that showed with that article title, they've got some sort of public safety initiative around a product type that they're going after. So they're going to all these different companies' websites specifically for this initiative.
Right. Okay. Is it a little bit different if it's a class 2 medical device where you do have, I don't know, you know, something that it's FDA cleared for, kind of like a broad, vague description? Can you then say that, well, because it works on this, then it will also work on, specific indications? Or should you maybe also like have some sort of disclaimer on your website saying it's FDA cleared for this? We have seen good results for this particular indication, for example. Like, would that be okay? Or I don't know if that question makes sense.
And no, that would have to be cleared in a separate 510K.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Okay. So once again, we see that we've got, new anatomical areas. It is different than what is specified in the regulation, and now we're exceeding exemptions because of it. So this is one of my favorites, this Owlet baby care. So this is like a little sock with a sensor in it intended to monitor vital signs, including blood oxygen levels and heart rate, and uses those readings to alert caregivers of desaturation or bradycardia. And so the warning letter says that, this is that Owlet's trying to say that this is a general wellness device for you to just monitor your baby's parameters. But because they're making these potential claims, they're marketing it as a general wellness, and they're saying that this is going to help the caregivers know if their baby has a medical condition, that it should be classified as a medical device, and it's going to require FDA clearance before being sold. So if we look at the warning letter goes into about every single web, sales outlet that they had, Amazon, Outlet, Direct, Walmart, Target, and they were all making the same claims that as oxygen level, heart rate, total hours slept, immediately notify you if something's wrong with your baby. So the FDA says that that per the FD&C Act, this does not fall underneath the compliance policy for low-risk devices that promote a healthy lifestyle, that it is in fact for monitoring and alerting to health conditions. So what's next? The Owlet, they submitted a 510K and they obtained clearance for their smart sock in 2023, and that sock was called Baby Sat, and it is prescription only. It does still track vital signs. It has to be for specific age and weight of infant, and that has acute or chronic medical conditions. And the clearance specifies that a healthcare provider has to set and adjust customizable alarms that they determine appropriate for that child's medical condition. So, but what else? So in the 2023 CDRH annual report, I thought this was fascinating. FDA took credit for helping bring the Owlet baby care through a de novo clearance shortly after the 510K in November of 2023, because it helps pulse oximetry for infants without the need for a prescription. So they did their 510K for the prescription only version, which is what they should have done to start with. And then they did a de novo for the over-the-counter version. But again, I find it comical that the FDA took credit for bringing this product to market in their annual report, like they did something good, when the company had done something bad, and this was the only way that they could market the product, was going through the proper channels. So I bet their investors were feeling a bit misled when they were like, oh yeah, this is general wellness, let's just go market it. So questions there?
Well, still, if you have a baby, I wouldn't trust the SpO2 sensors, because lately the FDA was very keen on SpO2 sensors, because a lot of them don't show good values. And I've seen it happening in a hospital, because I think Nonin is regarded the gold standard for SpO2 sensors. and it was validated against a direct bloodline for saturation. And the saturation was already dropped to, I think, 93%, and the nonin was happily showing 97. So even if the FDA approves it, those sensors are highly inaccurate.
So now we see we've got a problem with people misclassifying their devices. And I see this a lot in the digital health areas, people getting excited about being a general wellness product, and they in fact are not. They are going well beyond just measuring things for a healthy lifestyle. We also see that we've got multiple paths available based off of our intended user population, and that a warning letter is not the end of the road. You might have multiple correct paths forward. So here's another one for a device, another sensor, cardiac sensor called iRhythm. This was from May of 2023. And again, it identified the device as misbranded and adulterated because in its clearance from 2016, it is cleared for non-critical care patients where real-time monitoring is not needed. It is not intended for use on critical care patients. Very specific in the indication statement. So if we look at what their website states, they say their system is intended for near real-time monitoring of and that it notifies people immediately for high-risk patients. Now, to Nellie's point, you tell me that near real-time monitoring, near does not sound like a marketing team got involved with how to describe. They wanted to say real time, but it's not real time. So they just said near, and then they added immediately. And then they changed their intended use population. So we have a new patient population for high-risk patients, and the high-risk patients need real-time monitoring, not near real-time monitoring. But they go on because the actual technology why it was used for non-critical patients in the first place is that there is a transmission limit on that system being able to transmit patient ECG for reporting. And when the transmission limit was hit, the device no longer provides near real-time monitoring for high-risk patients. And also, it fails to provide adequate directions for use for the physician to know that there is a transmission limit or when it's hit. So again, they had to immediately cease their activities. And in this case, this one would, because of the risk to the patient, would have required a much more extensive corrective action than the cosmetic devices that we saw. So ensure that your claims are not inferring an additional patient population that's not approved with your device. And then again, make sure that the terms that you're using are not, misleading in terms of how your device is cleared. So any comments about that one?
Michelle, I've got a comment. I mean, okay, I get it. I get the point that you have to cease activities if you're caught out, but are there any kind of instances where the sanctions are slightly more draconian that would encourage people to follow the right path? I'm sort of listening to these and thinking, whatever the motivation, whether it's unscrupulous or just kind of chancy, there's a kind of an incentive or an opportunity to get stuff to market and then rectify it when you're caught out.
Well, the terms of warning letters, almost they all end with kind of the same language, which people I don't think fully understand a lot of times, but the FDA will not clear or they won't approve new devices if you have a warning letter, and they will not issue a certificate to foreign government for you to sell those products in other countries to start with. But if you do not adequately resolve issues in the warning letters, then they can, escalate to consent decrees, where the FDA basically comes and lives at your facility for an indefinite amount of time until they feel like that you have taken appropriate actions. And they can also force recalls and issue press releases on such and such products. Don't use such and such product. It is not approved for whatever. We see those come out daily. Jan? Jan, I think you're muted. Okay. Let me know when you got your sound going, Jan. Or put it in the chat if you can't. Okay. So next example. This one was on a company called Synovo. It's an orthopedic hip implant. This is interesting because their 510K was cleared in 1991. So we're getting in the Wayback Machine here before even really design controls. And it was for specifically for a non-cemented fixation of a painful hip cup arthroplasty. So in 2019, they make changes to the total hip replacement system without obtaining clearance from the FDA. And in 2023, they did a warning letter for the femoral resurfacing cup, distributed both as a standalone product from the total hip system. Then in January 2024, they issue communications to the public to avoid using Synovo total hip system due to significant modifications of the device, which differ from the version initially. So Richard, there's an example where FDA not only issued them a warning letter, but almost a full year later, whatever they've done here in this year has caused FDA to now issue a public notice about their product. But what do you think that this means about the people who have this implanted already? So, okay. Can somebody read the chat to me? Did Jen get her stuff in? Her question, I just saw it come up. Something come up.
She said she can't use the chat or the mic.
Okay, well.
So she's muted.
Okay, I don't know why that would be. Well, maybe just put it here in the Q&A. Okay, so these products are misbranded because they are not labeled or promoted for non-cemented use. So they've changed, essentially the technology of how this product is implanted. All the labeling for the device, including the package label, is prominently state the device is intended for cemented use only, and any non-cemented fixation of this device is considered investigational and needs a IDE. So further, it has a coding for cementless fixation, which is contraindicatory to their clearance in 91, and that is specified in their clearance letter. So therefore, they're adulterated, and this is fun. FDA has classified this type of hip joint replacement, because they've changed the technology of how it's implanted, as a class 3 device. So not only did they not go back for a 510K for some of their changes, they should have done a PMA for this type of fixation. So again, we had to immediately cease manufacture. We got this public notice, and in these cases, this likely, and then it even has recommendations for patients who may have received those devices after between 2019 and the time that this has come out, which means that company might not have taken appropriate action to rectify that patient population after the warning letter came out. So the FDA might have issued that could have been a step in the escalation. So just remember that the FDA never forgets. You know, it would be tempting to look at a clearance letter from 1991, again, before design controls, and say the FDA is not going to look at this. Shoot, I've got to go. So I'm going to just kind of jump ahead here. Your secrets for success, to Nellie's point, create a procedure for all your promotional content. These are the things that would be helpful to include in that procedure. Make sure that you are reviewing your original clearance and your product code, including your indications and technology. Don't forget, indications include patient population, contact duration, anatomical location, general wellness, exemptions, and recognized consensus standards. Don't misclassify your design changes as a letter to file. This includes reviewing your claims, your actual materials it's made out of, the technology, if you're adding software or an app, and how your data is handled or stored. So create a procedure, review your clearance letter, don't misclassify your changes, and there is a labeling checklist available for download in the virtual resources on my website. So, okay, so I had originally done this. So here are your guidance documents, and we are done.
So I think you said you're going to put this presentation in the Slack channel. Is that correct?
I could put it in the Slack channel. I think he was going to attach it to the video, but I'll put it in the Slack channel for you guys later.
I think this was a fabulous training session.
Thank you.
As always.
Thank you. It was a lot to get through. Luke, you had a last question?
Yes, corner case question. Sometimes you have a medical device, and it's also used in investigational things where you don't have clearance for. Or another example is 20 years ago, one of our devices went to space to measure on astronauts. Are you allowed to make, how do you call it, marketing on that, or preferences to that? So like our device is used in space, our device is used because those who are heavily altered devices, slightly different. So if you say something about it, you like it to reflect on your ordinary product, but it isn't. Corner case question.
There's a lot of nuance to that. There's a lot of nuance to that. I would think that there is a way that you could talk about that, but you would have to just be very clear and specific that these were not the devices that are used on planet Earth. So Greg, did I see you put your hand up? There you go. Dan. Okay. So I have got to go. I have got to drive to my next appointment. And so I know that there are a lot of questions in the Q&A and the chat. Could you guys please put those in the Slack channel? And when I upload the presentation, I'll make sure I answer all those. And Jan, I really want to hear your comments in that Slack channel. So. Okay.
Thank you very much.
All right, thanks, Michelle.
Great presentation.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
Lou.
That was great. Thanks.
Thanks.